Yep.
All right, welcome everybody to the Public Works Committee meeting here today. Started at 3:59. That's what I got. All right, first on the agenda is a roll call.
Counselor Adams?
Here.
Counselor Fitzgerald?
Here.
Counselor Verdon? Here. And Chair Jantz?
Here.
And Counselor Schilling is excused.
Perfect. Next is to approve the May 28th, 2024 meeting minutes. All right, does anybody have any changes they'd like to make? No changes? No? Move
Second.
to approve, do I have a second? Oh,
Second.
thumbs up, second?
Yes, second.
Cool. Next is,
Got to take a vote.
oh yeah, sorry, I'm going too fast. All right. So now we have first and second, need to approve those. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say, any opposed? No? Okay. All right, now we can go on. Next on the agenda is the listed discharge ordinance. Brian.
So I'm going to invite up our Attorney Technically, reverse title company,
Perfect.
Michael Clizzaberry, and he will give a presentation on this topic.
Good afternoon, council members, City Manager Lotta. Thanks for having us here today. In front of you have the illicit discharge ordinance that was presented in the May meeting. There were some grammatical tweaks that we made. We also added in the enforcement response plan to go with the illicit discharge ordinance so it could be approved, moved to council. And well, we are here to see if you have any questions about it, answer any that you have.
Any questions?
So yeah, this would be a good time if there's anything in the ordinance that you are wondering, like what it means, why it's there, and then if there's no questions, you'll have another opportunity to look at this, ask more questions because it will go before the full council. So with today, there's a recommendation in the staff report on page 5 to recommend the council adopt the illicit discharge ordinance in compliance with the DEQ requirements. And so, but if you have questions today, we're happy to address those. If you don't have questions today, you can, we would recommend you move the ordinance on to the city council, where again, you'll have another opportunity to ask questions and make any revisions or anything like that.
Question?
Well, I'm just wondering about this number 3 here. It says to establish legal authority to carry out all inspections, surveillance, and monitoring procedures necessary to ensure compliance with this ordinance. What does that mean exactly?
So,
What is necessary surveillance?
So, for example, if we had reports that someone was, on Saturday, doing, car repair work and then like dumping their used oil down the storm drain, we don't necessarily have staff that work on Saturdays outside of the police department and fire department. So we may set up a trail cam, in the area to survey over the weekend. Is this actually happening? To catch someone illicitly discharging things into the stormwater system. So that would be an example of surveillance. Michael, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, not.
Yeah. So that would be like an example of surveillance, right? Putting up video equipment to be able to see is someone actually doing this as it's been reported to us, right? We would not proactively just go out and put cameras around the city to you know,
So just
make sure this isn't
because
happening. That'd be like a complaint based.
Somebody reported it, you would put a camera
We could, I mean, if it was,
watch their premises?
so it could be, so generally, we would be watching public property, right? Because this is being dumped in a storm drain in front of their house or just down the street. So we'd be surveying public property, not private property in that instance, that scenario. So this just gives us, you know, the ordinance gives the authority for us to be able to do that. Another example, comparator, but not under this ordinance, would be when there's graffiti. We've put up trail cams in areas of known graffiti that's been repeated over and over again. And so we've put up trail cameras in those areas to,
Is
again, try
private
to.
property surveilled in the meantime? I mean, would you do something like that?
When we do graffiti,
Yeah.
no, that's public property. Same with the example that I talked about, right? We're surveying public property, the public
it's
storm
not
drainage
gonna-
system.
You won't like see their yard or their front door or,
I wouldn't expect us to do that. I mean, because, you know, again, the storm drains are usually out in the street.
well,
So we
yeah,
would
but
have,
if you set up a cam and it just, I mean, it could.
I mean, I think we would try to angle the camera specific down to where the storm drain is. So, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we are not trying in any way to have our cameras, you know,
No, I'm
look
not
into
saying
bedrooms
that you're
or front
trying
doors
to
or,
on purpose,
Right.
but it could happen.
yeah. I think the same way that a Ring camera can pick up, you know, your neighbor across the street, you know, that is potentially something that would happen. I think we would intentionally try to just focus in on the area where we know there's a repeat, you know,
And
illegal
what if
dumping.
And what if that doesn't happen? Then what recourse does somebody else have? Say that was a false accusation and they were surveilled and,
So again, we're not surveying the person as much as the area where an activity was occurring. And again, I don't think we would survey just because we got a complaint that this happened once. We would survey something if it was a repeat offense, right? We keep seeing the same person or people dumping in this same location, but it's always on a Saturday or a Sunday when we're not working. Then I think we would take that as an opportunity to say, hey, if we put up a trail cam in that area to say, is this actually happening? But just a one-time offense, there's other ways of identifying if something was illegally dumped there, right? There's residual that's left from, you know, oils and other chemicals. So we can see and have evidence, yeah, there was something dumped here, but we're not gonna know who did that, right? Outside of there already being video evidence through a Ring camera or something like that. And so, you know, but we could, you know, walk the neighborhood, something like what the police does, and say, oh, hey, there's a Ring camera there out in this area. Go up and knock on the door, hey, we're investigating this. You have, you know, can I look at your Ring camera evidence, you know, Ring camera for that? We could ask for that information, if a person was willing to give it to us. But I think more likely we would know that, hey, this is a repeat offense that's occurring because we're getting that complaint, and then we would do surveillance in that regard. I think that would be, not regularly used. You know, most times, we'll, you know, identify it's, hey, right in front of this person's house, you know, and the complaint will come saying, I know that my neighbor did it because I observed it happening, so we can usually find that out without having to do surveillance. But that's what that would mean.
I kind of feel uncomfortable with that, but I guess the council can hear it, whatever they decide.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, the city does surveillance on all sorts of other things, right? Criminal matters,
Oh, sure, but
non, you know, so.
not potentially someone's, you know, yard where their family is doing whatever families do. I don't know.
It depends on the circumstances of the nature of what we're trying to survey, but yeah. So, could be
Thank you.
public, private property. I mean, you know, because we have a police department, we do lots of different kinds of surveillance opportunities, so.
Any other questions?
I move to recommend the city council adopt the illicit discharge ordinance in compliance with the DEQ requirements.
We got a second? Okay. All right, let's do a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Passed unanimously. All right.
All right, thank you very much.
We're good. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
And last on the agenda is adjournment, so
Yeah. Is there anything else that the committee wants to talk about that's not on the agenda? It's maybe a good time to talk about it. Since I think we're gonna have enough time to talk about anything else.
I don't know, I don't have anything.
Okay. I will say that we did a tour recently of the Mercer Reservoir and the water plant and the intake. So we tried to get this committee all to go. We got over half of you there, which was great. And there's circumstances why others couldn't make it, and that's fine. We did schedule another time, Kim, is it the end of this month?
August 5th.
Or August?
Second.
August 2nd. And so,
The 5th is council meeting, yeah.
So I-
Kim and Debbie have received invitations.
the invitations for that, yeah. So hopefully if you're available and can go to that, that'd be a great thing, I think. I don't know, Micah and Nancy, you were there.
Yeah.
Was it well worth the time?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
definitely. It was fun and to learn how it works, and I didn't know about the filtering of the water and all that stuff, how that works. It's really interesting, so.
Yeah. And I liked, Counselor Jantz gave some good feedback on reversing the order of how we did the tour. So I've conveyed that to our tour guide, Jake, though, our water supervisor. Last time we started kind of at the end of the process and worked our way back to the beginning. So we're gonna start at the beginning of the process, start at Mercer Reservoir, and then work our way down. So, but no, I thought it was a nice day. It was good. If you walk out on the dam, don't put your hand on the metal. There's hornets and wasps up there. I discovered that. I didn't get stung, but when I put my hand on top of the metal plate and it started moving, I was like, that's not right. And I looked up, oh. So then I walked away and it was good. But no, it's a good tour, so
It
I
was a good
encourage you to be
tour.
able to do
And
that.
going to Mercer, they also helped to give us an idea how high when we add our next step, how high it goes. It's amazing. So they have a kind of a mark so that you can pay attention, get a clue of how much water would be added.
Yeah, so,
On the topic of water, I am continually flabbergasted as many times as we have talked about the water and the changes and the plan every day on social media. Well, we don't do anything, they're not doing anything about the water, we're gonna run out of water every day.
Yeah.
I don't know, so how else, other than knocking on every single door and explaining it?
yeah, pitting down the resident and saying, this is what's going on. So I'm working with Allison right now on developing like an infographic, for lack of a better word, something that communicates kind of the major city projects that we're working on. Development will just be one in general, kind of the development process. And, there's a statewide land use planning system. We have to have codes that are consistent with that program. Applications from developers have to be consistent with our codes and the state program. And if they're consistent with that, then we have to approve those. We can't say no, right? There'll be a discussion infographic on moratoria, right? And how building moratorias work and don't work and what you can do and can't do. And so describing that, we'll talk about the water project, where we are, what we're doing, the status of it, and kind of where we're at. As that project proceeds and progresses, we can modify that infographic so it continues to show progress. Each of those infographics, I don't know if they'll be combined into one or if it'll be several, but they will be kind of front and center on our webpage, so that we can easily refer people to our website. A good example of this working is on the 791 Main Street project, the former Bank of America. We had a QR code on a poster out in front, I think it's still there, that takes people right to a web page with a bunch of information. And so a lot of people ask about that online as well. And you get a lot of people commenting saying, well, the city's put out a lot of information on it. Go right here to the web page. So we're going to do the same thing with these other projects, including water. Because it is amazing how much we've done on it and how much we talk about it, and it still just doesn't sink in because people think, we don't have any water, we're running out of water, and a new house gets built and that has to put us over the edge of water. When the reality is we've almost every year have kept at least half of our stored water before it starts to fill back up with the rain. So we're not in a dire water situation. When we have drought years, we like to be proactive in the messaging so that we make sure we always have enough water. But I would say we're not in a situation where we're sucking the bottom of the reservoir by the end of summer. That just doesn't happen right now. And we're proactively working to make sure that that won't happen by building a new dam in the next several years. So.
I have a question.
Yep.
Just curious, and I don't know if you know or if somebody else, but like, what if there was a wildfire? Where would the water come from to fight that?
It's a great question, because we had one of those over the weekend. We did.
Falls City.
So, well, it was near our reservoir, so it was between, it was just a little bit, I can't remember the direction, but just off of Mount Laurel, which isn't too far away from our reservoir, Mercer Reservoir. It's within a few miles. And so there was a lightning strike over the weekend. I believe it was Saturday night, maybe Sunday morning. And so it spawned it was a big thunderstorm that came through, right? That dropped lightning all through Polk County, in the Cascade Range and the Coast Range. So a lightning strike happened near Mount Laurel and caused a fire to start. ODF&W and the Bureau of Land Management, because it's on their land, were very proactive in following those lightning strikes and putting out any fires. But the fire grew to about an acre and a quarter, acre and a half before it was put out. And so they wanted to grab water out of Mercer Reservoir. But the devices they had were airplanes that picked up about 700 to 800 gallons of water per pass. And the airplanes that they were using in Mercer Reservoir, they didn't feel as comfortable with the approach and the takeoff from that with the length of the reservoir, so they decided to use Willamette Valley or Willamette River water instead. And so, which was fine. So in that fire, it was put out pretty quickly, right? Because the resources were there right away.
If you had a huge fire, could that deplete in like a drought year? Could that really affect the reservoir? I know these are
Yeah,
things,
they're good questions to ask. And so I reached out to our emergency manager. So I don't have a solid answer on you of, can the city say no, right? Don't take our water. I don't know that yet, right? We don't.
obviously.
Right. So we want to be good neighbors. We want to support. We want to make it easy to fight a fire. But we also have to make sure we have adequate municipal water to last throughout the summer. So this is an early season fire that took place up near Mount Laurel. And so, using, 700 gallons probably, a dozen times isn't going to put a dent in our water supply, especially this year. In a drought year, that's probably still not going to do too much to injure us. But if you had a major fire where they were pulling out, 1,000 times or 2,000 times from Mercer Reservoir, 500 to 700 gallons per swipe, that's going to have a little bit more of an impact. Probably still okay, but it's a greater impact at greater times they have to dip into the reservoir. Now, of course, we want to preserve, all the land around it because fire impacts have problems. So again, we're going to be good neighbors. I don't know the legal question of when we say, hey, you have to stop, right? If it's later in the season, we don't have, a ton of extra water. Maybe it's a drought year. We're concerned about when the rain's going to start. That's when that question becomes more important. So because of this experience we just had, we're starting to ask those legal questions to be able to answer that out. But I did talk to the emergency manager. He let me know of the situation that was going on over the weekend, and they ended up not using our water at all. And the fire was put out, within hours. So, no, acre and a half. They got it fast and they put it out fast. So that was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Great questions. Anything else for Public Works?
I was just gonna say, I think that putting out the message on some of those hot button topics that are on, kind of swirling around is a great idea. Just
Yeah.
to be able to get the info out there and putting it on, Facebook, put whatever else we can put it at.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so we're working on that.
Make some YouTube
I would
videos.
expect it'll probably be a couple weeks before we get the infographics fully put together, as I work on those with Allison, but we'll get them out soon.
And there is something going on about apartments or something, 5-story buildings where the new 7-Star is, the gas station gathering.
Yeah, so there's,
They said there was a meeting here, and I was like, well, it's not on the city calendar. Is it like a developer meeting? Are they using the civic center for that?
yeah, there's a, it's,
Thursday?
I think it's this week sometime. So yes, the owner of the property next to the 7-Star across from the bowling alley, the land just to the south towards Rickrell Creek, they own all of that. And so they came in for a pre-application meeting with staff earlier this year to talk about a multifamily complex on that property. And so they're now at the point that they're moving forward. They want to move forward with an application. So one of our application requirements for that particular type of application is to do like a neighborhood meeting or a public meeting in advance, just to get the word out. Hey, we're looking at doing this application. It's just a way to get the public noticed and notified again. So that's our code requirement that requires that as an application kind of submittal requirement. And so, yes, they are having that meeting and they wanted to utilize the Civic Center as the meeting space. So it's not a city-run meeting, but it's a meeting for that project in the Civic Center.
And is it 5 stories you're talking about?
I think they're proposing a multi-story building. I don't know how tall, but it could be 5 stories.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the code, our code in the downtown will allow up to an 8-story building.
Oh, I was
So-
trying to remember what we
Yeah,
did
so
with
you can
that,
you
and
can
I don't
have
remember 8 stories.
you can have 5 stories, like a straight up and down, facade. 5 stories can go up and down. If you want to go above 5 stories, you actually have to set the building back, and then you can go up an additional 3. But there has to be an offset.
Do
So
we
you
have
can't
a-
have 8 vertical stories off the front. It has to be recessed.
Just thinking of safety, do we have a ladder truck that goes that high?
We've talked about mid-rise equipment, so the fire department's working on that, knowing that we have some potentially, 2 and 3 story buildings that might come in. Just making sure we're working on that. So yes, we're aware and gearing up for those sorts of things.
So explain where that's going in again. Or they're
So
looking at.
do you know where the gas station is to the south of the bowling alley?
Yes,
If you continue just south of where that car wash is,
yes,
I think they're proposing on like removing the car wash and then going south towards Rickreall Creek.
right, that's.
They own kind of all that land, so it would be going right there.
How many units?
I don't know.
I
don't
think
know
that
what
was
they're proposing.
highlighted on the parking stuff we talked about last Monday.
Yes, so
That
last
project
Monday,
in
when we
the-
talked about the parking study,
Yeah.
that was one of the 3 projects that was identified as, hey, there's some things that are in the queue or in the hopper that we know about
Okay.
that may happen. That's one of them. And our central business district doesn't require
Every
any,
one of their floors needs to be a parking floor.
well, that's what's interesting is our development code doesn't require off-street parking in the central business district. So you could have, a multi-story, multi-family building that requires no off-street parking in our downtown. So that's a great,
Parking over
That's
Well, and
a
this
great
other one
question.
over here
There's
that
no
they
street,
wanna do.
there's no street parking.
I know, yeah. So I believe this proposal is providing some parking
Can
in
we,
the preliminary that I saw,
can
so.
we add that to our development code? They have
You,
to provide
you
off-street parking?
could change your development code to talk about off-street parking in the downtown. It would not be in time for this application, because this application is already on a schedule to probably get submitted within the next, probably, I guess, few weeks.
It might not be
Development
part
code
of Public
update
Works.
takes several,
Yes, yeah,
at least
that's
2 or
not
3
for Public
months.
Works. Sorry, I guess I'm
Yeah.
getting.
Yeah,
going down a rabbit hole.
we're deviating a little bit ways off, but, yeah.
No,
All
it's
right.
good. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Nancy has a meeting.
You
right?
can ask me more
All right.
questions afterwards.
I'm gonna
Okay,
ask
alright.
you when we go to the.
Oh, great.
Are we,
admin meeting.
are we adjourning,
Yeah,
Public
let's
Works?
adjourn at, do we have to give it time? 4:21.
Ready to get your lunch?
All right. Well, welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
To the Public Administration Committee meeting. I would like to call the meeting at the order at 4:22. At 4:22, so I'm gonna ask the secretary to call the roll.
We have the same role that we did for the Public Works Committee meeting.
That's great, thank you. All right, so the items on their agenda, first one is to look at the minutes from the May 28th meeting and approve, or if there's any corrections.
Move to approve.
Okay, got a move, do I hear a second? Thank you, there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those not, okay, thank you. Okay, our first business is the itinerant merchant code update for mobile vending.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Adams. So this topic came up this year in particular because we've had 2 requests for mobile ice cream trucks, right? That drive through your neighborhoods and have the bells and whistles. Kids run out and they order ice cream and they get it. And so our itinerant merchant code right now kind of mentions mobile vending, but then it limits the geography of vending and itinerant merchants to the commercial and industrial areas. And so you don't see ice cream trucks generally driving through those areas because their target is the kids in the neighborhoods, right? And those in their houses in the summertime. So we're fixing that ability for mobile vending to occur in non-commercial areas with this code amendment. And so if you look on page 4 of 5 of the report, you'll notice that we add a definition for mobile vendor. And that is, a mobile vendor is an itinerant merchant that sells or offers to sell its goods, wares, or merchandise without a fixed location from a licensed motor vehicle or from a bicycle, trailer, or bicycle, tricycle, or other human-powered or electrical assisted mode of transportation that is legal for travel on a public street, road, or right-of-way. So that's the definition of mobile vendor, right? So that's what we're talking about, someone that can sell something from a vehicle that's licensed and able to be on a public street.
Anywhere in the city.
Anywhere in the, well, yes, anywhere in the city.
And it doesn't have to be food only, anything.
Can be other things. So if they want to sell their homemade bracelets and they're, on a bike and they drive around, they can do that. So, so then, in section 7.856, there's just a change because we add a subsection 4. So that's just a reference change there. In section 3, it says, except for mobile vendors, itinerant merchant activities not associated with a special event shall only be allowed in commercial and industrial zone with the written permission of the lot owner. And the proposed location must have adequate off-street parking, circulation, and other improvements deemed necessary by the city manager. So what that is saying is that mobile vendors are not tied to just commercial and industrial zones, right? So except for mobile vendors, meaning mobile vendors can be in other locations, which would allow them to, drive through the city park on Brandville Drive. It would allow them to drive through, the Barbary neighborhood or Bridlewood or, wherever they wanted to go within the city. They could go to, the downtown area or, in our commercial zones, but they're not limited to that. So that's what that changes the 3 says. And then subsection 4 kind of addresses some rules specific to mobile vendors. And it says mobile vendor activities are allowed on any public street, road, or right-of-way that is open to the public. A mobile vendor must continue in motion while offering its goods, wares, and merchandise, provided that the vendor may stop for the purposes of engaging in a sale of its goods, wares, or merchandise for personal rest periods and to comply with all traffic rules and regulations. So when stopping for personal rest periods or to engage in the sale of its goods, wares, or merchandise, a mobile vendor may not stop in an unsafe place or manner or in such manner as to impede vehicle or pedestrian traffic. So what that's saying is we don't want to have our city streets be used like in another itinerant merchant that's in a commercial area, right? They move up to one location, they park there, and they're there all day, right? We want them to kind of be continually moving, driving through, the neighborhoods instead of just parking in front of like a house or parking in front of a park, and being there all day. So that's kind of the first part of that section. The second part is we will allow them to stop, but when you stop, you have to stop safely. You just can't stop in the middle of the street, sell your product. You have to pull off into like a parking spot or where a car would normally park, on the side of the street against the curb. You can sell your stuff there. You can stop and take, a 15-minute break or a rest break, lunch break, whatever, and then continue on. But if you're unless you're actively selling, conducting business, then you have to be moving around. So that's what that section says. So that's kind of the code amendments, and happy to answer questions.
Sure.
So I've been noticing, went over on where, across kitty corner from Safeway.
Yeah, where Main and Ellendale intersect.
I saw a little pop-up, and I saw one in Monmouth as well, a little, I don't know, they had pineapple in there, and they were selling, I don't know what they were selling, but it
Yeah,
looked like
fruit.
food. It was for food of some sort. Is that included in this?
So, they would typically fall under a regular itinerant merchant license, except in this case, they were on public property. They didn't have a food handler's license.
Another question.
And we always require a food handler's license with anyone that's actually selling foods, like itinerant merchants. That's a condition of their approval. The county regulates and enforces that. So with those particular vendors, I will answer that specific scenario. So we reached out to the county and said, hey, there's these people doing this. We did not permit that activity. So they were operating without a license from us. We coordinated with the county. The county said, we will never give them a permit for what they're doing. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have, the things that would be needed for the health and safety of the public. So no, the county, our understanding is right now the county won't license that. And so we won't license it. And so that activity is just an activity that's subject to code enforcement, or our police officers, if it's on the weekend, they handle those situations as well. That corner is pretty common for people selling things without permits.
The food.
Right.
I'm not happy about that really, and kind of just, I don't know. It's just,
Yes.
I mean, when you sell ice cream, it's wrapped ice cream, I don't know,
No.
it's kind of different.
You're spot on with your concern. We were concerned about it as well. We got calls into code enforcement about that. And so they know that they can't be there anymore.
Okay, thank you.
And we will continue to enforce on anything that happens like that. But if, let's say, if someone, so these changes would not apply to a different vendor who maybe was selling ice cream. They just can't stop at that corner and sell their ice cream there for multiple hours, right? Mobile vendor.
We'll have all these little pop-up things all over Dallas, like food places and stuff, and I feel like they should be at the food park, or they should be not just spread out all over town.
Yeah, so we have a few food trucks, right, that are popping up in different places around town on commercial properties. So another example, so you have the food park down here, Gather Food Park. State Farm Insurance, they recently had an itinerant merchant that wanted to sell stuff in one of their parking spaces. And so they got an itinerant merchant license, which allows them to have their food truck in that parking lot for the next 6 months, right? But again, that's already allowed. These changes don't need to happen for that to be permitted. That's permitted because it's an itinerant merchant in a commercial area, right? That provides adequate off-street parking for the business that's there. So that's an area.
Those trucks are self-contained.
Those
They don't
trucks are
need-
self-contained. They do get permits from the county to make sure that they can operate, and they get an itinerant merchant license from us already. So the changes that you're looking at today is specific to mobile vendors, meaning they're moving around while they're trying to sell their products. And if someone waves them down, they pull over off the side of the street. They then try to transact the business if they can, and then once they've finished selling the product, they then move on, right, to sell more, like an ice cream truck.
Ice cream truck, taco truck.
Yeah, so like Kona Ice, if they wanted to drive around and do selling, so stuff like that would be permitted with these changes.
It talks about regulations of, I was just curious about the liability if they pull over and somebody runs out in the street, those obviously, who's liable for that? Is it like the business itself, or
No.
if somebody gets injured, I'm saying?
So I would say if, so hopefully people are safe, right, when trying to access a business, a mobile vendor. So they're crossing at crosswalks or, looking both ways before they cross a residential street, maybe doesn't have a crosswalk on it. And so I remember in the 1980s when I was growing up, right, you would chase the trucks down the middle of the street, and it was a different time.
Mom's throwing money
I guess
at
that's
you.
what I was
Right, your
picturing.
mom's throwing money at you to get out of the house, those sorts of things. So, no, there's personal liability for the person that ran out in front of a car and maybe got hit.
But we
If
don't have to
the,
put anything like that in.
I don't think that's required.
Okay.
We can ask our legal counsel before this gets adopted by the council, since he's not here today. But, I would say if the mobile vendor themselves is acting unsafe, and let's say, they drove up onto the curb and ran over someone's foot, then the mobile vendor would be liable for that.
Right.
We do require the vendors to have liability insurance, for their product that they're selling and for their activity of selling. So there is some liability there. It's more of an insurance question on, if someone ran out across the street to access the mobile vendor, could that person sue the company that was selling? Probably. Would they win? I don't know. It's a legal question. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Just
Do
curious.
you have something to add to that, Ken?
I was gonna mention the insurance, but it would also be the rules of the road, so it's a traffic, it would be a traffic
Right.
violation.
Right.
And it would, police would be.
Yeah.
I
So I
was
mean,
thinking kids.
no, it's a great thought to think about. And so, one of the main questions I have for this group is, are there things in here that we haven't thought of? I tried to think of, making sure they're operating in a safe manner, that they're, kind of moving around so they don't just set up shop and sell all day, like in front of Delbert Fredericks Park, right? Or some other, neighborhood, or in the park, right? They can't be in the park. They can drive through the park, or there's roads that do that, but they can't just like sit in the park and sell all day. So those are things that I thought of to make sure we're in the code, but are there other things that we're not thinking of?
So they can go through the park and if somebody says, hey, I wanna,
Yeah.
whatever,
Hey,
bracelet
stop,
or-
I want a bracelet, or I want the ice cream you're selling. They can stop, they'll pull over. There's not a lot of great places to pull over on Brandwell Drive until you get to like one of the parking spots. But they can say, hey, just meet me over there, right? And drive over there and park and then sell their goods while they're there. But once the, line of, one person, or if another person comes up and they, sell 2 or 3, once that line's gone, then they have to pull out and continue on their way. So they can't just intentionally drive into the park, and then put out the open sign, like A-frame, and be there all day. That's not permitted under this.
I know part of the fun with like ice cream trucks is the music, but is there any part with like how loud that, like, I mean, if I played loud music out in my street, people would complain.
Yeah,
about
so our code only regulates our code only regulates unnecessary noise. And unnecessary noise in our code in chapter 5 is defined as noises that come from sound amplification devices like radios or speakers between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Okay.
And so I would not, in an approval of an itinerant merchant mobile vendor permit license, I would have conditions that don't allow them to operate between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Okay.
Right?
I was
So
just
their operations have to be between those hours. So, but no, during the daytime, if someone's playing loud music, it's not a violation of our code.
Okay. I was just curious about with the mobile vendors, 'cause
Yeah.
as
so-
long as they're moving, they're not gonna be in front of
Yeah.
the house all day. So
Right,
that's-
yeah, I mean, and that's a way, at least the ice cream trucks, when I was a kid, the music is what,
Oh, yeah.
drew you away from the TV to run out with your,
Right.
change to buy an ice cream cone, so.
Or your red pies or
Or mud pies, or, whatever you're selling, so I think that, I would anticipate mobile vendors to utilize, bells or music or something to get the attention of their potential customers. But again, it's not a violation of our noise ordinance when it's done within the right hours, so.
Just thinking about
Yeah, it's great
if it needs to
question.
be in there or not.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Are we comfortable moving this on? Okay. All right.
So I think is there a recommended motion
Yeah.
to move
There's a
that on?
motion.
All right, page 3.
Yeah.
All right, I move to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for city council consideration reflecting the proposed changes to sections 7.850 and 7.856 of the Dallas City Code.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend the motion for this ordinance to our city council. Do I need to read that whole thing again?
Nope.
Thank you very much. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, it's approved. All right. Oh boy, flag regulations, a new topic of challenge here, so, Mr. Manager.
All right, so this topic, I don't want us to get hung up on
No, it's-
crafting the regulation today. We're not gonna do that. But what we're asking for is a recommendation that the city council initiate a development code amendment process to address regulations of flags within the city limits of Dallas. So we updated our sign code back in 2020, I think it's 2020. And when we did that, we did a comprehensive look at it. And sign codes are just boogers of codes. They're terrible in any city that you work in. Dallas is no exception. Because there's so many different types of signs and how they get regulated. You can't regulate a content of a sign. That's against the First Amendment of the United States. So we don't do that. So we regulate size and shape and placement. Those things you can regulate, but you can't regulate content. So we tried to, that's why we amended our sign code before, because we used to regulate content a lot like a lot of cities did. So we tried to remove all that out. One of the things we've identified recently is we have an exemption from the sign code from regulation and permits for flags that are endorsed or adopted by a governmental agency, right? So those don't require a permit or regulation. So then you would say, okay, how about flags that aren't endorsed or adopted by a government agency? What do you do with those? Well, our code is silent on that. There's no regulations. And so think of political flags, right? Those are pretty popular these days. You have Trump flags and Biden flags, and I don't like Trump and I don't like Biden, and you have all these things out there, right? So that's one example of a flag that's not an endorsed by a governmental agency flag. So how is that, that's not exempted, but it's also not regulated. So how do we deal with those, right? Our take on those has been, when we get a complaint, and we don't get very many, but when we get a complaint, we'll go out and say, hey, we got a complaint about your flag. It's not an exempted flag, but we also don't permit it. And so we don't allow you to fly that flag.
So because it's not exempt, it's not permitted.
Right, because we don't have code that allows it.
And we go over political signs and flags because I remember people talking about their whole garage door and.
Yeah, so.
I remember those conversations.
Right.
Miraculously.
Yes.
Enough, but.
So, and we had some of those conversations because our sign code, when we adopted it, we took out like campaign signs.
Right.
We inadvertently removed that from the code. So we did an adjustment before the last election to fix that. And so that's now been fixed in the code itself as well. But flags weren't addressed. So let's get off political flags. Let's talk about a different flag.
Oregon Ducks.
How about Oregon Ducks, right? Or the Oregon State Beavers. I'm a graduate of Oregon State, so I allowed those flags, but not the duck flags. No, that's a complete joke for the record. But those are flags that, while they're state schools, I don't know if those are endorsed or by the state. And so they're certainly not adopted by the state, because I've seen that list. But so what do we do with those flags? Or you see like, drink more coffee, or welcome to summer, or springtime's great, and the flowers on the flags. Business flags. Some businesses have their own flags. Those right now, we just don't allow those. And so I will say, from an enforcement standpoint, the city of Dallas does not actively enforce on flags. We recognize that this is a deficiency in our code. It's been a kind of a recent, I would say in the last year or so, recognition that, we missed that.
I think that needs to be fixed.
And we think.
People should be able to fly a flag if they want.
And we think it needs to be fixed too, and we agree with that. So all I'm asking this committee to do is, one, I wanted to let you know that there's a problem in our code. We need to address it, and our recommendation is ask the council to initiate a process where I can work with our city planner, myself, and our city attorney to craft some language around what the code could look like. We'll then bring that to the planning commission, to the city council. We'll probably start with the city council in a work session, just process-wise, so you can kind of see it and say, yeah, that's what we're thinking. Maybe there's some refinement to it. We'll take that to the planning commission, then to the council for final approval.
In order for something to be allowed, the city has to come out and say, we allow that. It's not just, I'm a free citizen and I can put up a drink more coffee flag if I want
No.
on my flagpole.
I would say no to that answer, except in this case, we have codes that say what types of flags are exempted, and then it says everything else is subject to a permit or regulation, but then we just don't have the permit or regulation. And so because we don't have the permit or regulation, we're effectively saying you can't have anything else.
Yeah.
So if we were just silent on flags altogether in the code, like we didn't have the exemption language, I don't think we'd have a problem.
Well, then let's just get rid of that.
That could be a solution. So we will work through,
I don't know why we have to give permission to people to fly a flag. I mean, if you
Yeah.
wanna say they can't be, 20 by 50 flags or
Right.
something, fine, but.
right? So I think what we will do is so we have to craft what the code language is gonna say. I'm in favor of what you're talking about. Let's just get out of the game altogether and say.
We're not gonna police people's speech. with
Right,
their
and I
flags.
think,
That's
I think we
ridiculous.
should have some limits on the size of a flag. And maybe location,
And
like
location.
you can't, mount it on top of your roof or something, right? Something like that might not be appropriate. Cause we just,
I'm genuinely serious, if it's my roof.
If it's your roof,
I'll
why?
flag.
we don't allow any roof signs in Dallas.
Yep.
So there are some non-conforming roof signs. Starlight Lanes is one of them, but that's pretty common to not have roof signs. I think flag
And
poles
there's a
are
lot of
appropriate.
things I'd rather regulate than flags and signs.
Right. So again, we'll get to what the regulations are gonna look like. I think it's probably the draft will look something like what you're saying. But yeah, so
Well, I hope so.
we'll work through that. So what we're looking for today, again, is just
And, yeah.
a recommendation that the city council initiate that process so we can start to make the amendments to the code.
Okay, then I move to recommend to the city council that they initiate a development code amendment process to address the regulation or lack thereof of flags in the city of Dallas.
Second.
Can I do that?
Second amendment.
Perfect, that's your
Okay.
motion. I wrote it down, or lack thereof.
All right.
And who seconded that? That was
And
Debbie? Okay,
She seconded.
Perfect.
Yes. Although, okay, there's a motion and a second. We need to take a vote on recommending the council to initiate a development code amendment process to address the regulation of flags or lack thereof in the city of Dallas. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes and off it makes its journey.
perfect.
All right, is there anything else that should come?
No, so I will say, to answer kind of the conversation we were having in the Public Works Committee meeting about downtown parking and stuff, that's also regulated in the development code. We're gonna put together a package of items for development code updates, so it won't just be the flags. We'll have the flags, we could talk about we'll have some other things. When we just updated our development code last time, there were a list of, I think, 4 or 5 topics that the council pulled off of that last update for some further discussion. We might bring a couple of those topics back to include with this, so I would expect to see some things like that, so.
And, I mean, it's no secret to you that I've been kind of wondering about Counselor Briggs printed up the code for the definition of family, and it's not
Yes.
really a definition of
Right.
family,
It's household definition, right? Yep.
but I'd like to address that too.
Yeah, so with this recommendation to the council, when you initiate the development code amendment process, identify, just during that time, that discussion, say, hey, these are some of the things that we want to look at, right? And we'll write the list down and then we'll start looking at, the changes that we want to make. And if you have an idea of what you want it to change to,
Yeah, I'll have to think
yeah,
about it.
so just think about it between now and, we'll have this council meeting on August 5th, where we'll bring this topic back up. So just between now and then, think about maybe if you know what you want it to say, or what you think you want it to say, or what you want us to kind of draft language towards. If you don't know the exact target, but something, say, hey, 6 is a lot, maybe we want to do 4, something like that. Maybe when I want to define family as opposed to household, if you want to change things like that, just bring up those topics, and then just direct staff to work on some drafts of that we can bring back to you, and then the planning commission, then you for final approval. All right? That's all I had, Chair
All
Adams.
right. All right, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Ed.